My wife secretly sold our family home of 20 years for $750, $0 to cover her gambling debts, then betrayed me by hiding the proceeds and hiring a lawyer to fight over the $300, $0 I inherited. Now she's threatening to take everything, including our daughter's college fund. It all started with a gut feeling I couldn't shake. You know that feeling when something's just not right, but you can't quite put your finger on it. That's how I felt for months. My wife Lisa had always been a bit of a drama queen, but lately she was acting way more secretive than usual. She'd be on her phone all hours, whispering in the bathroom, and I caught her deleting texts on her iPad more times than I could count. But I never thought it would lead me to something this shocking. Our marriage had been solid for over 20 years. We built a life together, 2 kids, a nice house, good jobs. I worked as an engineer, and Lisa was a stay-at-home mom for most of our kids' childhoods. We had a routine, and I thought we were happy. But the signs were there. She was distant, often dismissive, and always quick to shut down any questions I had about her whereabouts or who she was talking to. Then came the night I decided to check her bank statements. I'd noticed some odd charges, small amounts here and there, but enough to make me suspicious. When I dug into her account online, my stomach dropped. There, in black and white, was a series of transfers totaling over $750, $0. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was the sale of our family home. Our home for the last 20 years, sold without my knowledge or consent. I'd always believed that house was our biggest investment, a symbol of our stability. Turns out my wife had sold it to cover her gambling debts. Gambling. She'd been hiding her addiction for years, and I had no idea. But that wasn't the worst part. As I scrolled through the transaction details, I saw a line that made my blood run cold. The proceeds from the sale had been deposited into her personal account, yet she was telling me she only got a few $1,000s from the sale, claiming it was for renovations. I knew she was lying. I could see the full amount, $750, and she was hiding it. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. How could she do this to us? How could she sell our home, our family's history, and keep the money secret? I decided I needed to confront her immediately. I called her into the living room, my hands trembling, trying to keep my voice steady. She was annoyed, brushing off my questions, acting like I was overreacting. I told her I knew everything: the sale, the money, the debts. Her face twisted into a bitchy sneer, and she started lying right then and there. "You're crazy," she snapped. "I told you I was fixing the house, refinancing, doing some updates. You don't need to worry about my finances." But I knew better. I saw the bank statements, the transfer details. She was lying through her teeth. That moment marked the beginning of a nightmare I couldn't have imagined. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was emotional, deep down to my core. I'd trusted her with everything, and now I realized she'd been hiding a massive secret, one that threatened to destroy everything we'd built. I felt a mix of rage, heartbreak, and confusion. How could she betray me like this? How could she sell our home and then lie about the money? It was like she'd been planning this behind my back all along. In the days that followed, I started to piece things together. I found receipts for her secret lawyer, and that's when I learned she was fighting over the inheritance I'd recently received, $300 from my late father's estate. She was trying to take that too. I couldn't believe it. All the while, she was threatening me with divorce if I didn't back off. She was trying to control everything: our money, our future, even our daughter's college fund. I felt like I was losing my mind. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just sit back and let her take everything: my house, my inheritance, our daughter's future. I started making plans, gathering evidence, figuring out my next move. I knew the stakes now, and I wasn't going to go down without a fight. This wasn't just about money. It was about my dignity, my family, and the life I thought I had. And I was done being a passive victim. No more secrets, no more lies. I was going to find out exactly what she was up to and put an end to it. After I uncovered the bank statements and saw what Lisa had done, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing, trying to process how someone I loved for so long could betray me so completely. I felt sick, angry, and helpless all at once. I knew I had to act fast, but I also knew I needed to gather more evidence before I made my next move. I started digging through our joint accounts, her phone, her emails, anything I could get my hands on. It wasn't easy. She was smart about hiding things. She'd delete messages, clear her browsing history, and even hide receipts. But I was relentless. I knew her pattern. She'd lie, deny, then spin some story that made her look like the victim. That bitch always had a way of twisting things to her advantage. One afternoon, I caught her in a lie about where she'd been. I confronted her directly. She was in the kitchen, pretending to be busy making coffee. I asked her about the lawyer she'd hired, about the fight over the inheritance, about the sale of the house. Her face went pale for a second, then she snapped at me, "You're overreacting. You're paranoid. I don't know what you're talking about." That's when I saw the flicker of fear in her eyes. She knew I was onto something, and that made her even more dangerous. I pressed her further, demanding the truth. She finally burst out with a string of lies about how she had to cover her gambling debts, how she was trying to protect us. She kept saying she loved me, that she was only doing what she thought was best. But I wasn't buying it anymore. Her words felt like empty excuses. I could see right through her. She was a master manipulator, always had been using her charm to spin her lies. The biggest shock came when she admitted she'd sold the house secretly. She tried to justify it by saying she'd only done it to save us from foreclosure, but I knew better. I knew she'd been gambling away our savings, our retirement, everything. She'd been so obsessed with her addiction, she'd sacrificed our entire life for her secret debts. And now she was fighting me over the inheritance I'd worked so hard for, trying to claim part of that too. The emotional toll hit me hard. I felt betrayed, crushed, like I'd been punched in the stomach. I trusted her with everything. Our marriage, our family, our future. And she'd been lying to my face for years. I looked at her, and for the first time I saw a stranger, someone who'd been playing me all along. I felt a surge of anger. I wanted to lash out, to shout, to make her see how much she'd hurt me. But I knew that wouldn't fix anything. I had to stay calm, plan my next move. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything, her lies, her betrayal, the sale of our home, her threats. I realized I was at a crossroads. I could try to forgive her, try to rebuild what we had, or I could cut my losses and walk away. The decision felt impossible. I loved her, but I also hated her for what she'd done. I kept thinking about our daughter, about her future, and whether I'd be able to protect her from all this mess. In the meantime, I decided I needed to get legal advice. I contacted a lawyer I knew from a friend's recommendation. I needed to understand my rights, especially regarding the inheritance and the house sale. I also wanted to know what she could do to me, how far she might go to take everything I had left. The lawyer warned me that Lisa's actions could be considered financial abuse and that I had grounds to fight her in court. That was a small comfort, but it also made me realize how serious this situation was. I started to plan my next steps carefully. I knew I couldn't let her get away with this, not without a fight. I also knew I had to protect my daughter from the fallout. She was innocent in all this, caught in the middle of her mother's greed and deception. I promised myself I would do everything I could to shield her from the chaos, even if it meant tearing my own life apart. I didn't know exactly what was coming next, but I was certain of one thing. Lisa's lies had shattered my world, and now I had to decide whether I fought to save what was left or walked away from everything I'd ever known. The pain of betrayal was fresh, raw, but I was determined to face it head on. I owed myself that much at least. The more I thought about it, the more I realized Lisa's lies weren't just about money, they were about control. She'd always been manipulative, but this was on a whole new level. She sold our house behind my back, hid the proceeds, and then tried to fight me over my inheritance. It was like she was trying to rewrite our entire life story, and I was just a pawn in her game. The worst part: she kept acting like she was the victim, like I was overreacting or crazy for catching her. But I wasn't about to let her get away with it. I started digging into her phone, secretly of course. I knew I shouldn't invade her privacy, but I needed answers. What I found was even more disturbing. There were dozens of messages between her and a guy named Mike, a guy she'd been seeing for months. I don't know how I missed it, but the texts were clear. They'd been planning to meet, talking about escaping and starting fresh. The sex stuff was there too, explicit and frequent. She'd been cheating on me, right under my nose, and I never suspected a thing. My stomach twisted when I saw the messages. I felt like I'd been hit by a freight train. How long had this been going on? Was she planning to leave me for him? All the lies about her fixing herself, about how she was just stressed and needed a break, those were just cover stories. She was having an affair and she'd been hiding it from me the whole time. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. The betrayal hit me harder than anything else. I'd always believed in honesty and loyalty, and now I knew she'd been cheating on me for months, maybe longer. It made me question everything about our marriage. Was she just pretending to love me all these years? Did she even care about the family she was destroying? The anger boiled over. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of lies and there was no way out. That night, I confronted her again. This time, I had the evidence. I threw the phone on the table and told her I knew everything about the affair, the sale of the house, the money she'd hidden. Her face twisted into a nasty smirk and she tried to deny it, to spin some story about how I was paranoid, how I was imagining things. But I had screenshots, receipts, proof. I slammed the phone down and told her she was done lying to me. Her reaction was classic Lisa. She started crying, saying I was breaking her and that she loved me. She begged me to forgive her, said it was just a mistake, that she was under so much stress. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I saw through her tears and her fake apologies. This wasn't some moment of weakness. This was who she was: selfish, manipulative, willing to cheat and steal to get what she wanted. I felt like I'd been punched again, not just by her betrayal, but by the realization that I'd been living in a fantasy. For all those years, I'd thought we were partners, building a life together. But she'd been secretly planning her escape, gambling away our savings, cheating on me, and trying to take everything I had. I was furious, crushed, and deeply hurt. I wondered how I'd ever trust anyone again. In the days that followed, I made some tough decisions. I knew I couldn't stay in this marriage, not after everything I'd uncovered. I started collecting more evidence: bank statements, texts, emails, everything I might need if this went to court. I also contacted a divorce lawyer and explained everything. I wanted to make sure I'd be protected, especially concerning the house sale and my inheritance. I had to fight for what was rightfully mine, and I wasn't going to let her take it all without a fight. Meanwhile, Lisa kept trying to manipulate the situation. She'd send me fake apologies, crying over how she'd made mistakes, how she'd never meant to hurt me, but I saw through her. She was just trying to keep me quiet, to hold on to what she wanted. I refused to be played anymore. I told her I was done, that I was going to take legal action, and that she'd regret ever crossing me. The emotional toll was brutal. I felt like I was losing my mind, losing the marriage I thought was forever. But deep down, I knew I had to do this, not just for me, but for our daughter, who deserved stability and honesty. I couldn't let her grow up thinking betrayal and greed were normal parts of life. Looking back now, I realize how much trust I'd given her. I thought I knew everything about Lisa, but it turns out I was blind. She was hiding a whole secret life, one filled with lies, money troubles, and betrayal. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know I won't be a victim anymore. I'm tired of her games, and I'm ready to fight for what's left of my dignity and our family. I thought I had seen the worst, but Lisa's next move proved me wrong. After I made it clear I was serious about divorce and fighting for what's mine, she went into full damage control mode. She started gaslighting me, insisting she was the victim, that I was overreacting, and that I was ruining everything. She even had the nerve to accuse me of cheating, which was laughable considering I had been the one uncovering her secrets. But that was her pattern: twist everything around to make herself look innocent, even when she was the mastermind behind the chaos. One morning, I got a call from her lawyer. I was expecting a fight, but what I heard was even more shocking. Lisa had hired a lawyer of her own, and she was claiming I was abusing her emotionally, trying to paint me as the villain. She even accused me of threatening her, which wasn't true at all. All I wanted was the truth, and now I was being painted as the bad guy. That's when I realized how far she was willing to go to keep her secrets hidden and to control the narrative. At that point, I knew I had to be meticulous. I contacted my own lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Corinne who specialized in family law. I told her everything about the house sale, the inheritance, the affair, the money she'd hidden, and her manipulative tactics. Corinne advised me to document everything, keep records of all interactions, and prepare for an aggressive legal fight. She warned me that Lisa might try to claim I was unstable or abusive to turn the courts against me. I had to stay calm, collected, and strategic. Meanwhile, Lisa's behavior grew more erratic. She'd storm into the house, scream at me in front of our daughter, and then burst into tears, pretending she was the victim. It was all a show, an act to sway whoever was watching. I was sick of her manipulations, but I knew I had to stay strong. I kept my distance, avoided her traps, and focused on gathering more evidence. Every text, every email, every bank statement was a piece of the puzzle that would prove her lies. One night, I found a series of texts between Lisa and Mike, the guy she'd been cheating with. They were talking about how to cover their tracks and how she'd have to leave everything behind if things got too hot. The texts were explicit, and it was clear she was planning to run away with him once she had her hands on the money. That was the final proof I needed. I snapped screenshots, saved them securely, and planned to use them in court. The emotional toll was relentless. I felt betrayed, angry, and exhausted. I'd loved Lisa for so long, and now I was questioning everything about our life together. How could she do this? How could she sell our home, betray me, and then try to turn everyone against me? I kept asking myself if I'd missed the signs, if I'd been blind to her true nature all along. The pain of knowing I'd been played for a fool was overwhelming, but I also knew I had to stand my ground. I owed it to myself and our daughter to fight for what was rightfully ours. In the midst of all this chaos, I started to realize that I wasn't just fighting for money or property. I was fighting for my dignity, for the truth, and for my sanity. I couldn't let her manipulate me into giving up everything we'd built. I had to stay focused and keep my emotions in check. I knew the legal battle wouldn't be easy, and Lisa would do everything she could to turn it in her favor, but I was determined not to let her win. I had the evidence, and I had the law on my side. Every day felt like a war. I was constantly on edge, wondering what her next move would be. I kept thinking about our daughter, how this chaos could tear her apart if I didn't act fast. I promised myself I would do whatever it took to protect her from this mess. I couldn't erase the betrayal, but I could make sure she grew up knowing the truth. That was my motivation now, to fight for her future, for my own dignity, and to finally put an end to Lisa's lies and manipulation. The legal battles dragged on, and Lisa's tactics only intensified. She hired a high-priced lawyer, someone who was known for dragging cases out and twisting facts to her advantage. Every court date felt like a new obstacle. She kept claiming I was trying to manipulate her, that I was unstable, that I was trying to ruin her reputation. It was exhausting, but I stayed steady. I knew I had the evidence, her texts, bank records, the sale documents, and I planned to use every bit of it. One day, I found out she'd gone behind my back and transferred a huge chunk of the money from her account to some account in her sister's name. I'd suspected she was hiding more, but this confirmed it. I confronted her about it, and she just shrugged and said she was doing what she needed to do. That was her usual line: blame everyone else, act innocent. But I wasn't buying her lies anymore. I contacted my lawyer immediately, and we filed a motion to freeze her assets. I needed to protect what was left. Meanwhile, Lisa kept pushing the narrative that I was the bad guy. She told our daughter that I was trying to take everything away from her, that I was mean and controlling. Our daughter was only 16, but she was old enough to see through some of her mother's manipulations. I made sure to keep her informed, to let her know I was fighting for her future, for her college fund, for the stability she deserved. It was heartbreaking to see her caught in the middle, but I promised I wouldn't let Lisa ruin her future too. Things reached a boiling point at the next court hearing. Lisa's lawyer tried to argue that I was mentally unstable, that I'd been abusive, and that I didn't deserve to have any say in the property or the inheritance. I sat there, seething, knowing that all her accusations were lies. I had kept detailed records of everything: texts, emails, bank statements, and I presented them confidently. The judge listened carefully, and I could tell he was seeing through her manipulations. When it was my turn, I calmly laid out the facts. I explained how Lisa had secretly sold the house, hidden the proceeds, cheated on me with Mike, and tried to steal my inheritance. I showed the court the evidence, screenshots, bank records, the sale documents. I told them how she'd been manipulating everyone, including our daughter, to get what she wanted. The judge looked at her, then at me, and I could see the wheels turning. It was clear I had a strong case. In the aftermath of that hearing, I felt a sense of relief. I'd finally laid out the truth in a court of law, but I also knew this wasn't over. Lisa would fight tooth and nail to keep what she thought was hers. The legal process was slow, and I had to be patient. But I was confident that justice was on my side. I'd fought too hard, gathered too much evidence, and I was ready to see this through to the end. The hardest part was watching her try to manipulate our daughter, trying to turn her against me. Lisa was crying, pleading, telling her I was a bad father, that I was trying to take her away from her. It broke my heart. But I stayed consistent, showing her the truth, being there for her. I told her that I loved her and that I was fighting for her future. I promised her I'd do everything in my power to keep her safe and secure. Looking back, I realize I learned a lot from this whole nightmare. I learned how dangerous betrayal can be, how someone can hide their true self behind a mask for years. I also learned that sometimes you have to fight hard for what's right, even when it feels like the world is against you. Most of all, I learned that trust is fragile, and once broken, it's almost impossible to fix. But I also learned that standing up for yourself, even in the darkest moments, can bring clarity and strength. I'm still in the thick of it, but I know one thing for sure. I won't let her steal my life or my future. I'll fight until the very end to protect what's mine. The final court date came and went faster than I expected. Lisa's lawyer tried every trick in the book, more lies, more accusations, even some emotional blackmail. But I had the evidence to back up every claim I made. When the judge finally delivered his decision, it was clear he saw through her manipulations. He ordered her to return the sale proceeds of our house, to pay back the inheritance she'd tried to claim, and to cease her attempts to manipulate the situation further. It was a partial victory, but it felt like a huge weight lifted off my shoulders. In the aftermath, Lisa's attitude shifted. She was angry, bitter, and vengeful, trying to sway our daughter further, but I stayed firm. I kept showing her the truth, supporting her emotionally, and reassuring her that she didn't have to choose sides. Our daughter, thankfully, saw through her mother's manipulations and stayed close to me. That was the one thing that kept me going, knowing I was still fighting for her, for our future, and for myself. As months passed, Lisa's presence in my life diminished. She moved out, trying to take what she could, her clothes, some jewelry, a few personal belongings. But I made sure she left the house with nothing more than that. I kept the house, the inheritance, and most importantly, I kept my dignity. I also took steps to rebuild my life, getting therapy, focusing on my career, and making sure I was there for my daughter as much as I could be. Looking back now, I realize I learned some critical lessons. Trust is fragile, and betrayal can come from the most unexpected places. I also learned that sometimes you have to fight fiercely to protect what's yours, your family, your money, your sanity. But the biggest lesson, that no matter how deep the betrayal, you can come out stronger on the other side if you stay true to yourself and refuse to be manipulated anymore. Today, I'm rebuilding my life. I've started focusing on my own happiness again, and I've learned to be cautious about who I trust. I don't regret fighting for what was rightfully mine, even if it was the hardest thing I've ever done. I want others to know that betrayal doesn't have to define you, and that even in your darkest moments, you can find a way to stand tall. Trust your instincts, gather your evidence, and never let anyone take away your dignity. Because at the end of the day, the only thing that truly matters is that you stay true to yourself and never let anyone manipulate you into losing your sense of worth.